Anna is also.
Yeah.
Your code.
Yeah, and I'm recording too.
Hi, Oksana.
Oh.
So let's start, I suppose, yeah?
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
start.
Hello, everybody. And hello to everyone who will see the recording during our conference. It's so big pleasure and excitement to see you, Chris, here. Thank you for coming, because we have a lot of questions about solution-focused practice we really want to ask you. And I believe people in Russia are also are very interested in your answers about it. So our idea is to talk a bit, I suppose, about 40-50 minutes to talk about what is solution-focused practice and how can you define it. Is there such a thing as a pure solution-focused or not? And if it is, what does it mean? So, hello, and let's talk about it.
So maybe we can take just a minute to introduce ourselves for you, Chris, to know who we are.
Yeah,
maybe I can
good.
start. I'm Anna, and I'm like a key manager of our conference. This year. So I'm really glad, and I think that on the conference we will have a small discussion about this interview, because our colleagues are always interested in all these questions about solution-focused approach, and we hope it would be a great base then to discuss in our community.
Okay.
So can you please answer, like, what is SFBT for you? Yes, how to define what is SFBT and what is not?
I think it's lots and lots and lots of things. So I guess it was most crystallized in this book, which was our Bible. We taught ourselves how to do solution focus, mainly with this book, back in 1988 when it came out. And I think one of the things that we have done is not just look at the practices and techniques in the book, but we've taken up the philosophy that Steve DeShazer adopted, which was that of Occam's razor. If you can get that, my grandmother used to be a great believer in William of Ockham and his razor, though she'd never heard of him. But I come from a town in the north of England called Darlington, and on one side of the town there's a little village called Croft. On the other side of the town, there's a little village called Cockerton. And she used to say, you don't have to go to Cockerton to get to Croft. If there's a shorter way, take the shorter way. So we've constantly looked at our practice and thought, can we do without this? Can we do without the other? And over the years, we've dropped many of the techniques that are in clues. But I don't think we have dropped the essential principle of solution focus, which is that clients know the way forward, and our job is to help them find what they know. And in terms of a client's life, we know nothing. So what did we do? One of the outcomes of our first research was that it wasn't possible to judge whether somebody was motivated or not. Or, put it another way, if people were motivated or not motivated, according to our assessment, they did just as well. So the unmotivated people did as well as the motivated people. The people that were forced to come, and that was most of our clients, did as well as thoroughly. So we decided, since we can't tell if somebody's motivated, we decided to treat everybody as motivated.
Wow.
People think that's stupid, but if you look at it another way, if you think of motivation as somebody having a good reason to be where they are, then that's motivation. And to think that our clients don't have a good reason to be talking to us is to be very disrespectful of them. Most of our early clients had a good reason to speak to us, because if they didn't, they might lose their children. So they weren't clients who are happy to see us, but they had a damn good reason for seeing us, because the authorities might take away their children if they didn't. So we learned to treat everybody as having a good reason for seeing us, and then our job was to find that reason. And another thing that we thought, and this was we first put forward this idea at an EBTA conference in mid-90s, 95, 96 maybe, conference that was held in Stockholm, where there were 20 attendants, 20 people. So it's hardly a conference, really, it was a meeting. And we'd thought that people didn't come to see us to solve problems so much. They came to see us, and they didn't come to see us to understand the past. They came to see us, and we got paid for changing somebody's future. People came to see us because they wanted a different future from the one that they were heading towards. At that time, we had a very right-wing, anti-welfare government, Margaret Thatcher. There was no way that Margaret Thatcher was interested in helping people because she was kind. So what we realized is we were paid, social workers and people like us were paid to change the future, to stop people who were costing money, to help them get to a point where they weren't costing money.
Mm.
We're there to check, and that led us to think not so much of goals, because by then we were talking about goals and trying to achieve narrow goals. We thought of futures, and if you think of the future, it's wide. Goals are narrow, the future is everything. And so we started thinking about not about achieving goals, but about developing a future the client would prefer to have, which is where we came up with this notion of the preferred future. So that was a big step. We also found from our outcome studies that people did just as well whether they completed tasks or not. So we stopped giving tasks. And that led to a total fundamental change in practice. So if you watch a tape of Steve DeShazer, about between a third and halfway through his sessions, you'd see a slight change in his questioning. And the change was moving from just being interested in the client to having a conversation also in his head about what sort of task would be useful for this client. So he'd then start to ask questions which didn't come from the client, but came from his idea of judging the client to see what sort of task. So he'd ask, are these exceptions predictable or not? Which was a question that led to, if exceptions weren't predictable, he'd give a task which contained some chance, some unpredictability. this sort of thing. So when we stopped giving tasks, we didn't need to talk to ourselves. We could listen more to the client, and that led us into much more interest in the client's future. And we began to develop these very, very detailed descriptions of the future, which de Souza talks about but never does. Detailed descriptions he talks about in his work. We've got just loads of tapes of Steve when he came, because he worked with us lots of times, came over lots of times. Nowhere is there any detailed description of the future. Very, very, very cursory. So we got into more description of the future. And then we were thinking, wouldn't it be nice to be able to work without actually knowing what the client's problem is? And that was an idea, and we sort of drifted into asking the questions that now become part of the general view of solution focus. This question: what are your best hopes? What are your best hopes from our work together? What are your best hopes from this conversation? We don't know when we started using that, but the first examples are probably mid-90s, I should think. Mid-90s that it started to appear on our tapes. What are your best hopes from our work together? And that again changed the nature of our work. So instead of looking at the problem and then looking for exceptions and then looking for a future that fitted the exceptions, we would find the client's desired outcome, get a detailed description of that outcome, and then try and find out how much of it was already happening. So we sort of left exceptions behind as a main element. We still use them. If client talks about the problem a lot, then we'll ask exception questions, but it's not part of our everyday repertoire. So, and then we realized we just had 3 questions, or as one person put it, we only have 1 question and 2 subsidiary questions. So what are your best hopes? What would your life be like if the hopes are realized? And how much of these hopes are already happening? So I think that's about as simple as it can get. That's all totally those ideas are in all of Steve de Souza's works. I think we're all products of our time, so he had a lot more stuff in than things like Ericksonian hypnosis and ideas about systemic ideas, which we no longer have. We don't think of this as systemic. We don't think of it as, we don't even think about trying to understand anybody. Just see it as this process of trying to get your questions about the future, about the past, and hope that somewhere in most of our sessions, the client says something, answers a question, which leads them to say something they haven't said before, which opens a door they didn't know was there before. That's the idea, really. It's the client's answers that do the work. I had a client who at the end said, she said, it's the questions, isn't it? It's the questions. And I said, well, I think it could be the answers. And she said, yeah, no, I can see it's the answers, but I would have never have had those answers without the questions. So I think the questions are like a catalyst in chemistry. The questions set something in motion, but are not involved in what happens. Yeah. The client might change. Another client said, I know that if I hadn't met you, I would now be dead. But I want you to know you have not touched my life at all. Which says it all. And I said to her, that is the most wonderful compliment I've ever had. And to be honest, you haven't touched my life, but I always remember you. And she said, and I'll always remember you. And that to me is the essence of it. But what she was saying is that whatever she did herself. Totally, absolutely, she did herself. So I think that's to me where we are. But I now teach this in a way where each of the techniques that I use, I'll teach in a way that people can use alongside any other technique. So you can ask questions about the future, even if you're doing CBT, if you're doing any sort of therapy. You should ask questions about the future. You should ask the best hopes question, irrespective of what approach you have. And you can use scales, irrespective, so that people can take these techniques and put them somewhere else. They stop being solution focused because they're being used in a different frame, but they're still totally useful. And those people who really like them can put them all together and be solution focused. So I see these as a set of useful techniques that can be adopted by anybody or put together as a whole. There we are.
Thank you.
That was a long answer to a short question.
But it was a very interesting answer.
May I ask the second question, because I think it's connected to this topic. My name is Olga. I live in Montenegro, but I still have like strong connections to the Russian-speaking society of solution-focused therapists. You speak about values and some kind of philosophy, I guess. Sounds like this. And what helps you to stick to these values? What supports your like belief in these principles of SFBT? And maybe do you have sometimes some will to do something else? And how do you resist it, or if it happens to you, or maybe it doesn't happen to you? So maybe tell some words about this.
No, I just find this still very fascinating. So I'm not at all tempted to wander elsewhere. I guess I'm with Steve DeShazer here. I see it as pragmatic. It works. One of the things when we first decided to teach ourselves, we were family therapists before this. We taught family therapy, but I taught on the first family therapy master's course in Britain. So we were well-established family therapists, and family therapy, I thought I'd love, I'd fallen in love with it. It was a bit of a shock for me to actually be unfaithful to my first love and move to solution focus. But one of the things I really liked about it was I thought, actually, this is something I could do. I could do this. It's simple. I can do it. And that was very appealing to me. Family therapy was getting a bit complicated. Also, family therapy by the mid-80s was developing its own way of pathologizing clients. And I went into family therapy because it didn't. Initially, it had no sense of pathology. So I was getting a bit fed up of it. And this solution for us, oh, I can do this. And so I like that. I like the idea of being able to do something. And I do like the idea of this process we've gone of simplifying it. And but who knows where it'll go next. But I don't see it as a I don't actually see it as value driven. See it as pragmatic. It does lead you to think well of people, I guess, because that's what you're seeing by and large. You're seeing the best of people. But it's essentially pragmatic, and for me, it's something I do professionally. It's not something I do in life. But I'm a solution-focused person. I have solution-focused conversations professionally.
Okay, thank you. So it's it's simplifying things, and it leads to the feeling that I can do it.
And it works. It works as well as anything else. It's kind to people. It's not asking anybody to put themselves down in any way. So it's very kind. It works as well as anything else. It doesn't always work, but doesn't do any harm. And so from that point of view, I think it's of great value.
Yeah, so it's still connected to values, and it's like it works. Like,
yeah, and I think we should do, if we're working with, there are people with money who can have therapy like going to the gym. Yeah, fine. Yeah, it's not that. That's absolutely fine. But for most of the people I've worked in my life, they're in their lives are very awful, often very uncomfortable, very painful, and I see a value then in helping people get back to somewhere better as quickly as possible. So I mean, I do think this approach, is just, it beats everything in terms of helping people move forward. And whether, even some research came out a few years ago, I think from Finland, saying that there was some evidence that psychoanalysis was marginally more effective than solution focus. Well, it might be, but a psychoanalyst might see 10 people, we might see 200 people in the same time. And if 80% of 200 people find that have a better life, you've done much better than 8 or 9 psychoanalyzed people having a better life. So I just think it's economic, and yeah, it's really ideal for if you're working in the public sector, if you're working with people with severe family or mental health or relationship problems.
okay, thank you. And maybe I have another question. It's about the idea that our clients have the idea how therapy should work for them, how it should be constructed better for them. And some clients come to us and tell, I need to process my trauma, and therefore you should open my wounds, and that's it. That's how I see therapy. So what do you do in such cases?
Well, I've never had a client say that. I've worked with people that are traumatized one way or another, particularly through childhood abuse, pretty well all my career. So nobody's ever said that. People have asked sometimes, yeah, I wonder if I should talk about it. I often say, when it has occasionally happened, say, would it be best to talk about it with me or with someone in your life who you trust, if there is such a person? All but one have said, oh, yeah, there is somebody I can trust. So I think that, and keeping it in life rather than taking it out into therapy is a good idea. A couple of times, just recently, I've had somebody tell me the details, but not for therapeutic reasons, really. I think I can only think of one person who said she really wanted to tell me. She told me, and at the end, because she said she thought she was going mad, at the end of telling me, she said, "I'm not going mad, am I?" So sometimes I think sometimes telling someone about a trauma is the first time you know what happened. If you're traumatized and it's inside you and it's not articulated, you're subject to all sorts of emotions and blame and such like. When you put it into words, you hear yourself. And in this case, this one actually thought she wasn't mad and she could begin to reconstruct her life. But mostly, I think the idea that you need to go over the past is dangerous. And there are lots and lots and lots of people that believe that. There's a big industry around trauma now with people saying it's a very, very, very specialist subject and ordinary people shouldn't approach it. Solution focus, my experience is it's very often one session is enough. I did work, there was a children's charity, a children's home it was started off in the 19th century and is still a big voluntary organization caring for children. And about 20 years ago, there was a big scandal. It turned out that thousands upon thousands upon thousands of children had been abused. And they dealt with it very, very, very badly. And one of the ways they dealt with it is by setting up a team of 6 people to respond to complaints, to ex-clients complaining. They had a waiting list of 4,000 with ex-Bernardo's children who'd been abused and wanted to talk to somebody. So we offered to see them. Most of our therapy we've done for free over the past 30 years. We make our money from training and see people for free. Not everybody, we just see public sector clients, child protection, mental health, those sorts of cases. And I saw quite a few, and often 1 or 2 sessions was enough. And this with people who'd suffered lifelong. It's one woman in her 70s. She'd sort of lived a half life or all her life, really. And after 1 session, she felt like her life had opened up. And part of me just wanted to cry that there'd been such a waste of life for want of some simple questions early on. So, yeah, I think trauma very often can be dealt with in 1 session by solution focus. And without going over it, really.
Thank you. Can I ask the next question? Yeah, okay. So my name is Ekaterina. As I said, I'm from Russia, but me too, I live in Montenegro now. We're all 3 of us, we live in the same town. So I have a question that was not on our list, actually, but I'm thinking now. You are talking about like basic principles of SFBT and how it works with different topics, and that you never met a client who like didn't want something else. Like you said, you never meet any client who would say, I want you to do something differently. Like,
oh, no, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Sorry, I've never had a client who said, I want something. A specific occasion, I've had clients who wanted to talk about the problem, and I've said, and what do you hope that would lead to? And they'll tell me an outcome, and I say, well, what do you think would be best, to resolve the problem and then talk about it, or talk about it beforehand? Most people have said, well, to resolve it. So we've done a solution-focused session. Occasionally, about 3 or 4 times, I've had people think, say, I think I need somebody to talk to. Thanks very much, but I'm going to go to a different therapist. Or I've referred people to a CBT person, for instance. But it's very rare. Mostly, I suppose mostly I'm seeing people who are sent. they're being told to go, and
Yeah. Yeah,
so
okay. So maybe I understood you wrong, but okay. But my question was about different topics that therapists can work with.
mm,
And do you think, for example, if I want to work with families, do I need to have some special trainings about families, or is SFBT is enough, like main principles, and we just use it? Or I want to work with, or some person came to me with a question about, I don't know, alcohol or something. Yes, some he uses something. So do we need special training for each small topic, or is like SFBT is universal, you know?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, no, we don't. So somebody who's drinking knows more about drinking than somebody who doesn't. People on drugs know more about drugs. I mean, and people are expert in their own lives. They know how to get out of these difficulties, because people do get out of them. So with families, uh, lots of different ways you can work with families. If I have a family or a team, I ask each person in turn, what are your best hopes? I'd ask each person in turn a little bit of the future they want. I'd ask each person in turn for about something that's already working for them.
Mm-hmm.
If I had 6 people, it would be like 6 mini sessions threaded in. Best hopes, best hopes, best hopes, best hopes. Preferred future, preferred future, future. Scale, 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 scale. That would be, and it's we've got plenty of evidence of that working. Teams or families or any groups. I know. I know nothing. I know worse than this. I am the most unsporty person in the universe. Anything to do with sport makes me feel small and insignificant and worthless. Um, because that's how I used to feel at school when I was always the last person picked for any games. Nobody wanted me on their side because I was so hopeless. And all through my life, if I've been with groups and they've suggested, playing any sport, I've just wanted to die. And I've trained a lot of Olympic coaches. I've helped lots of sports people perform better.
Yeah, but for example, if it's about some, for example, like OCD, right? Like obsessive compulsive disorder, or I don't know, ADHD, like can we work with that without like being a specialist in this small, like in this exact topic?
Well, because we're not interested in OCD, we're interested in people living their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your best hopes out of this? I'd like to not have OCD. And what difference would that make? I wouldn't have to be worried all the time. And what difference does that make? And eventually clients will say something like, well, I'll be able to get on and lead a normal life. Okay, let's imagine you wake up tomorrow and you're beginning your normal life. And the person will describe what life would be like if they were living the normal life that they want to live. And in more cases than not, it would work.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Saying there's no evidence of any significantly different outcomes related to problems in solution-focused work. So an example, a big example here, which is a struggle for people, is in speech and language therapists. Speech and language therapists have a huge amount of knowledge and techniques, and some of them now are just purely solution focused because it works just as well and faster.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
so there are, I mean, it's much more challenging. Much more challenging for people that have a skill in a particular, like stammering, like stroke recovery, where there's sort of physical things and things that you can learn. But solution focus seems to work in these areas as well. I know you're looking at your watch. Or are you just looking at how many steps you've done today?
Thank you very much for answering. It's so supportive. I like it very much. Yes.
Okay, let me ask you the next question. There is two solution-focused ideas like arguing in my head sometimes. And the first idea is not solution-focused idea, but it's what I see in your work, for example, like being consistent in asking solution-focused questions. The question about best hopes and so on. And the other idea is to stop doing what is not working. And if, for example, I did some solution-focused work with a client, the next time he or she came and saying that it didn't work for him, I wonder, should I do something else? Or if right in this session, he or she says, stop asking me these questions. I don't know how to answer them. It doesn't suit me. I don't know. Should I do something else, or should I be like consistent in what am I doing? What's your opinion on that?
Well, it's what, 35 years since I did anything else. So if I tried to do anything else, it would be like a surgeon getting out a rusty scalpel and saying, okay, let me have a look at your heart. I'd be totally incompetent at anything else. So this is all I've got. It's one thing. I think there's a philosophical difficulty about doing something else, because then you presumably have to stop thinking of the client as the expert, which means that somehow along the way you're deciding whether you are going to treat the client as an expert or not, which put at a meta level makes you the expert. If you're deciding that the solution focus is the right thing for this person, then you're actually not, you're keeping yourself in an expert position, even though you then start to treat the client as an expert. So there's difficulties that way. But if you've got something better, why not? And there's lots of stuff that is adjacent to solution focus, narrative stuff's very close in many ways. The early MRI stuff is close. The stuff from Galveston, the Harry Gulishian and Anderson stuff has lots of parallels. But it does mean that you have to then have a different view of the client. But for me, what I say to clients is, look, if after 3 sessions nothing's changed, nothing has begun to change, then it's probably not worth going on. It's probably better to cut your losses and find somebody better. But I wouldn't. Obviously, occasionally you get stuck with a client, you panic, and I do the same. I'll try something different. I'll slip out of solution focus a bit, and it's always a bit of a disaster, really. Anyway, so
okay, so
I would have to refer people on. I wouldn't be able to sort of do anything myself. But it's not going to work all the time. It's just bad luck. Occasionally we don't ask the right question. I assume it doesn't work because we don't find the right question for a client, which is clearly what's going to happen. We're not going to always find the right question that leads to an answer which opens doors for them.
So
Can I ask the next question?
Mm.
I'm Oksana. I still live in Russia, and I still remember our perfect SFBT course that I had at yours in 2018. Maybe you still remember me, I don't know.
Oksana, yes.
Well, first of all, I'm very glad to see you, and I came here to see you because it's an honor for me. And well, I practice SFBT and I remember all the theory, but today I have some practical question. Well, you know, in Russia and maybe in all over the world, now there are so many anxious people. Almost every first my client is very anxious now. And I understand that we don't do diagnostics. We follow the client. I understand this, but I noticed that when working with such clients, there are some speciality in work, even if I use SFBT. And I want to ask you about your practical experience in this area.
You'd have to tell me a little bit more about what is it you do then different when you have someone that's suffering from anxiety. What is it you do different?
Maybe I always work very, very slow first, my difference, and very, how to call it in English? I don't know. Let it be very slow, and I'd like to ask you, do you see any difference or not, maybe?
I suppose I don't think like that. I wouldn't think about that. If a client said they were anxious, if it was expressed, then I'd be, oh, what would you rather be, or da da da. I'd work out an outcome which was going to help them lead a better life. But I wouldn't be addressing anxiety. I'd be addressing the future that they wanted, and the pace I'd go at would be really dependent on their pace. So some people are very quick to answer. Some people are very slow. I've had a session once where I asked 6 questions in 1 hour. Not because the client spoke a lot, but it just took sometimes 5 minutes for the client to actually answer a simple question. So I'll go slow or fast depending on the client. But I wouldn't think of categorizing people. I would. I would. I mean, look, there are immense reasons for people to be anxious in certain places of the world at the moment, and I'd acknowledge that as part of the kind of state of the context. But I don't think it would guide. I think it would change my view. And I suppose what I would see as some anxiety is inevitable. Really, if your life is at risk, the life of your children is at risk, then obviously there's good reason to be anxious and worried. And you're not able to do anything about that. You might be able to help somebody handle it. Might be included in what you do. But would still be the same. I'd still ask the same. There's a project in, I don't know whether it's still going, project in Turkey supporting Syrian refugees during the Assad regime. Lots of Syrian refugees on the borders of Syria and Turkey. And there's a program of providing EMDR for trauma, which is very successful. Volunteers were trained in very simple EMDR. 2 or 3 sessions were making a big difference to a big number of people. What they want to do is then introduce some solution-focused sessions to help people in these dangerous, very dangerous camps, just to help them find ways to survive in the camps. And I think they had a problem getting enough people to actually go there in the end, because it was such a dangerous place to go as a whether you were working there or living there. But I'd see it, I'd just see it as the same, do the same. People are in their lives. People are in their lives and in their context, and our job when we're asking questions is to help them get on with the future that they want in a realistic way, not in a fairy tale way. And if you're living under threat of death,
yes, but sometimes in such cases, people are afraid of even thinking about future, any future. I face this problem.
Well, why would they see somebody then?
Sorry again?
Why would somebody be seeking a therapist or counselor if they didn't want to look at the future?
According to theory, I should find why.
Well, I think I would assume that if somebody is there, they are there for a good reason, and it would be about the future, and it becomes our job. And this question, what are your best hopes? People sort of, it's an incredibly complex question, and it's our job. Part of our skill is to develop the question until the client does express a hope for the future. Because why would they be there if there wasn't a good reason? Why would the person be there if there was not a good reason for them being there? And our job is to find that good reason. And inevitably, it will be about the future, even if it's expressed in terms of the past and present. It's just inevitably the case. And you could say, okay, we're just helping the client define what they already know, or you could see it as a process of social construction. We ask a question, what are your best hopes? The client says, I don't have hope. We say, and if you did have hope, and our side of the conversation keeps alive the notion of hope, somewhere in this process of social construction, the notion of hope will transfer from my words into the client's words.
Yeah.
I mean, you could see it like that. I don't see it like that myself, but you could see it as a product of the hope being a socially constructed notion that comes through the conversation. But in the end, it's still the client's hope. What it is they hope for is theirs. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And maybe I have a last question, and maybe it sounds a little bit personal, but still. Have you ever had anything like professional crisis in your solution-focused practice? Like any moment that you maybe were confused or something else about your professional, about your work? And if yes, how did you cope it?
there's lots of sort of different sort of angles to that. Obviously, there's lots of times where I felt absolutely at the edge of my skill. Times when I've hoped the ground would open up and swallow me. And I've written somewhere, in fact, that often these turn out to be the most creative moments of your career. Because at those times you have to find a way through, and in that process of finding the way through, you can come up with an idea that is new to you. So one example was a young woman. I was running a course for mental health, for working in people working in a mental health hospital, and they were all very, very miserable. And I had a 4-day course. And in the first morning, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be a tough 4 days because everybody's so miserable. And I thought, well, I'll just have to do it hour by hour, 4 days. Anyway, the first break, the consultant psychiatrist came up and said, look, I'm sorry we're miserable, but we have a patient who's going to die tonight. And suddenly, that changed the whole thing. Or tomorrow night. And she told me about this young woman who was brought in compulsorily to a hospital to be force-fed because she was starving herself to death. She'd sewn into her clothing an overdose. So she'd hidden an overdose in her clothing, took it. She was on 24-hour watch. So the nurse watching her on the videos on the screen saw her do this. They managed to get to her, pump her out so that she didn't die of the overdose, but that had weakened her so much they could no longer force feed her because that would kill her. So they were expecting her to die that night or the next night. And this consultant looked at me and I said, what, do you want me to see her? I said, well, it can't do any harm, can it? So that evening after the course, went to the hospital and I asked this young woman, I sat with the psychiatrist, I said, what are your best hopes out of this meeting? And she said, I don't do hope. And you felt like all the hope in the universe sort of. And I said, if you did do hope? And she said, I don't do hope. And I just thought, who the hell am I to think I could come in and save the world and solve everybody's problems and, you know, da da da. And at the same time, I just had this insight, which was one of the best things ever. I thought, actually, I don't have to save the world. I don't even have to save this young woman's life. What my job is now is just to ask the next question. At any time in our work, whatever's happening, our job is just to ask the next question, nothing more. Just to ask it. And that was such a release. And she didn't die. I had 8 years follow-up. I saw her one more time a year later, but I had feedback over 8 years, by which time she was married with a couple of kids, and still a bit iffy about eating, but no longer danger getting on with life, really. So some of the stuff that we do that's been part of our work, part of our way of thinking about this, has come from those times when you think, yeah, God, I should be emptying dustbins and being a therapist. Other times, there's obviously when you're involved in life, high risk situations like suicide or child abuse, you know, you wonder, should I have, but so far, that's been all right. Sometimes you sort of wonder, should you have done something? Should you have trusted the person? will they still be alive? Will their kids be all right? But, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. So we are right now out of time, unfortunately.
Okay.
And I just want to thank you one more time. It was really so inspiring and even beautiful. I feel it like a beautiful speech and a beautiful conversation. And I'm sure that there are a lot of ideas which will be very useful for different practitioners in Russia and differently experienced. Even if you are first days in SFBT or if you are 15 years in the approach, it will still be helpful. So thank you so much one more time that you spend this hour.
I've finished with one very quick story with when Perestroika and Glasnost were filling the world. There was the Russian trade mission that was a big building in North London on a hill with lots and lots of antennae and things on the roof, and and these antennae could look down onto all our spy buildings and work out what they were doing. So it was full of spies. Actually, nobody had any contact with them. Then Glasnost happened, and suddenly people would come out, and I was working in the National Health Service in a therapy clinic at the time. I had my first Russian family who came from this opening up. And I started my solution-focused session, and the man said, I want you to tell him what to do. Your son, I want you to tell him what to do. And I said, well, and he ended up walking out. So solution focus wasn't right for him then.
Okay, great.
Okay. Good luck with your conference, and thanks ever so
Yeah.
much for bringing me along.
Thank you so much. I think that we will send you some letter after the conference and after our discussion with the answers of our community. So thank you so much one more time.
Thank you all. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you.
It was very nice.
Thank you.
You.
Thank
See
you.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.